In emergencies, it's been found that 75% of the persons involved in emergencies go to hell in a handbag, and 25 will remain calm and try to do something to improve the situation. It's been shown many times that those persons that have been properly trained, briefed, and drilled stand a much better chance of survival than those that don't. So it's very important you can learn particularly about hypothermia, the silent killer. Do you realize that you need 6 to 8 pints of water every day in an emergency situation? 6 to 8 pints. That's 8 12-ounce pop cans full. That's a lot of water. And every time I'm out and I'm thinking about, I can't quite drink that much, but I try to do so to keep the proper ratio of liquid in my body and from what's going out. And as I said before, you lose 2 pints of water every day just breathing. So it's very important that you keep up your body fluids and food. If you have a person that is hypothermic and you're treating them and they can talk relatively good to you, but they're still cold and you're not letting them move and you're keeping them warm, and that they need food and water. So it's very important to give them warm, sweet drinks or give them food, because that's what it takes to get their body working back into the proper ratio so they can keep up the temperature that they need. 98.6 is considered the average, what we need. So it's very important that you have that liquid and that food there, and give them that. Don't give them alcohol. Don't give them alcohol. What that does is just thin the bloods down, makes it a lot harder for the body to retain what it needs, and so you're actually damaging the person by giving them alcohol. Warm drinks, sweet drinks, and food that they can consume very easy, like any type of a pudding type or so. And if they're in really good shape, let them have what they want up to a certain, but don't let them move. Very, very important that you don't let them move. Also, when the person goes into a liquid, usually water, when they hit it and it's cold water, I told you about the dorsal reflex, where they what happens when they hit that water and that dorsal reflex takes over, the heart rate goes up 35%. The heart rate actually goes up 35%, and that's why it's advisable, like when I was in the Coast Guard, that if we could remove the person in a horizontal position where you bring them up straight. So, because as you remove them from the water, the opposite happens. The heart rate drops 35%, and that's when they go into ventricular fibrillation of the 4 chambers of the heart getting out of sync. So it's very important that if you can possibly bring the persons up out of the water like this and horizontal. In rough water, you can't do it. You got to grab the person, you got to get them on the deck and start working on them right away, one way or the other. And if they could still talk and breathe, we would take them and put them in a compartment so they're not getting wet anymore, and would try to start stripping them down and cover them with a blanket. And we had straps that we could strap them on in, but get the wet clothes off as soon as possible. Don't turn them into an ice box, as I told you earlier. Very important that you remove that person. So when you take them out and that heart rate's going to drop 35%, remember then that you might have to start CPR right away. It won't take long to get them back into breathing again on their own. They're not dead until warm and dead. And so a lot of times I would go to the hospital with a victim, and they would get to the hospital because they'd start CPR and they would give them IVs, they would give them warm blankets, they'd give them, but we're still giving them hand compressions and they had the ambu to give them the proper amount of oxygen and that. but you work on them, and we take turns working, because you can only do CPR so long until you get tired, in particular if you're over a table or if you're down on your knees. That's why it's important to get the person on a fairly solid object. If you're in bed and don't try to do CPR in the bed, because you're pushing down, and as you push down, the bed goes down, and you're not getting the proper compression and getting the chest down. Lay them down on a hard object so you can do this much easier. So you got these things to go over. You could put warm potatoes, warm apples, warm something solid in the microwave. You can put them underneath the arms, underneath in the groin, behind the head, and then into the neck to warm up the person slowly. And you keep the extremities, the arms and the legs, wrap them in small blankets or large towels, and concentrate on the furnace area here, getting warm, but warming up the arms and legs slowly so you don't get that cold blood to the heart. That's very, very important. And so some of the most important things are strip them down, put blankets on them, or put them in a sleeping bag. If you put them in a sleeping bag with somebody else, and you got your chest bared, and they're there, and you're hugging them, then that's great. Two in a sleeping bag will warm them up. You have a lot more heat that'll radiate around the person. So all these things are very, very important. And that on wet clothes, I think I told you that wet clothes can lose up to 90% of their insulation. So that's why it's so important to get those wet clothes off that person. Many times when in the Coast Guard, when we pull people out of the water, and I'd say, take them back and strip them down, and they would strip the person down until they would come to their underclothes, to their skivvies or their bras, and they always left them on. And then we would have quite a discussion afterwards that you're taking one of the main areas of losing heat, and you leave that on. And they said, well, it's just something that's been taught to you all the time, that you don't strip a person's clothes off, but in emergency you do. You take their clothes off all the way down to nakedness, but you got a blanket over the top. You're not taking their clothes off and gazing down on them. You've got a blanket over them, and you're taking them off and do it, and keeping them covered as much as you possibly can as you're doing this. So it's very important that you don't let them move. Cut the clothes off, as I told you before, and take care of that person. Handle them like eggs, like you were a dozen eggs, and you got them in your hands. You handle them very carefully and lay them down softly. No roughness to the body. The body now is cold, it's fragile, and it has to be taken care of very like a baby. You cuddle it, and you take it, and you lay it down easy, and take it of the easiest part that you can on laying them on down and taking care of them. And in the shelter, if you're out and you need a shelter for the person, and there is no homes around, there's no place to take them, and you got the person that's soaking wet, you got to get them out of the elements. So you make a shelter, and there's all kinds of little ways you can make a shelter. The main thing is trying to find a log that's down, a little extra hump that is up in the air, and you can put some brush, limbs of trees on, get them out of the wind, get them out of the elements as much as you possibly can, and then start some of those little things I told you about getting the clothes off. Sometimes you can take some of their wet clothes off, particularly around the furnace, and take your own warm clothes and cover them with that. But be careful you don't get hypothermia yourself and you got two instead of one.